So the name of this webinar is the AI cyber arms race. And we're really going to focus today on how AI is transforming cybersecurity. Obviously, AI is transforming everything, as we've seen over the last few months, but we're going to focus on cybersecurity. So joining me today, I'm Tony Petricola. I'm co-founder and president of Agile Blue, headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. You can see the sun shining. I mean, we're springing over here in Cleveland. It's 70 degrees, sun shining. It's a wonderful day. But really, the stars of this webinar are two folks that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and I think you guys are going to find what they have to say to be enlightening. So, Stefan Semmelroth, Senior Director of Security for a great partner of ours, Avant Communications, and like I mentioned, Stefan is former military, so he doesn't appreciate us starting a few minutes late. Stefan, you want to give 2 minutes on you and Avant?
Absolutely. So, yes, former military, and Tony, of course I'm fine being a couple minutes late. Like we have to give everybody an opportunity to show up, and if I try to impose my former ideals on everyone else, that's a losing strategy.
100%.
So, yeah, Stefan Semmelroth, first incident response was in 2001 when I was pulling cables and writing batch scripts back in the day. And then West Point, electrical engineering, Army, infantry, Ranger School, Afghanistan. And then I found out I had broken my back, and the Army was standing up this new cyber corps at the time. So I threw my hat in the ring, got picked up to be one of the Army's first cyber officers, and did incident response on a couple different continents. Medically retired, started a company, ended up selling that, and then came up to be a channel partner, now a distributor. So we get to work with vendors like Tony and Agile Blue and all sorts of other vendors across the cyber ecosystem, and go help consultants all around the world figure out when to bring in Tony and team so that way their clients can be successful. So it's been a wild ride, and anything that I say will absolutely be outshined by Anupam.
Well, absolutely. That's why you brought Anupam on. Anupam Rala is the Senior Vice President of Cyber Risk for Marsh McLennan, obviously a very distinguished firm globally. Anupam, do you want to give first of all, thank you so much for joining. And do you want to give a few minutes on you?
Absolutely. Very good morning. And what an introduction, Stephen. That's an amazing bio. I mean, this is crazy to know both of you and work with you. And Stephen, this is the first time I'm meeting you on this webinar. So glad to be working with you. So good morning, folks. I'm with Marsh McLennan, as Tony mentioned, and it's a risk management firm, global risk management firm, and we advise people on all aspects of risk, and cyber risk is clearly one of the most important aspects of the game today. I've spent most of my career in last 25 years in North America, focused on network security, and moved on to application security, and a large amount of time with managed security service providers and top consulting firms. And I've also spent quite a bit of time in Asia Pacific as well, in network communication and satellite communication. So that's really my background. Spent a number of years as a security incident management lead on various aspects of security on both sides of the continent. So really looking forward to this webinar.
Absolutely, as are we. Thank you both so much for joining, and everyone. When you look at today's discussion, there's a little ChatGPT focus to it, just because that's been in the news. But really, we want to focus on how AI is going to shake up cybersecurity. Really dive into some practical advice and examples, because when you join a webinar, that's kind of what you want, right? Really just have some good discussions around the benefits and the challenges. We'll talk about ChatGPT hackers. I had a great quote from a client the other day that said, we've just turned every 12-year-old into a hacker. And I thought that was really interesting take from a very prestigious CIO. And it was just a funny way to look at it, right? And then we'll talk a little bit about some roadmap things that we're launching for our clients as well. That'd be way at the end. So if you don't want that commercial, you can just leave, I guess, if you don't want to hear that part. 2 seconds on Agile Blue. As everybody knows on this call, for the most part, we're headquartered in the United States, global footprint. We got tremendous, great customers globally. We're a 24/7 security operations center as a service. and we provide that platform for our customers to detect cyber attacks before a breach occurs. So that's a quick overview of Agile Blue. I'm going to take a couple slides before bringing in Anupam and Stefan. But I think it's interesting to frame a couple of things. Always when we talk to customers, we hear, what's the difference of AI, machine learning, or they kind of use them synonymously, right? And of course, it'd be great to hear from Stefan and Anupam if they hear some of these things too. But when you look at machine learning, machine learning has the ability to focus on interaction and data, learn, potentially even change algorithms, as it is constantly consuming a ton, just an absolute ton of data. AI definitely brings the ability, especially the cognitive ability, to grow, learn, and probably a key component, carry out tasks based on what that algorithm is showing. So when you think about being able to carry out those tasks and empowering to basically become more knowledgeable, it basically is taking something that might be a little stoic, a little standard, growing a little bit into something that can not only meet something, but also carry out tasks that maybe humans or maybe more legacy types of technology was able to do. And when you think about AI, that key component of not only understanding the data, but learning from it, a key component is anywhere and everywhere. It's constant growth, it's constant movement. And when you look at AI, to have that access to, and this is where it could be a little bit scary, a repository of institutional memory. One of our customers said to us, and they're in a little bit of a legacy organization, they said, as people retire, we just lose things, right? We lose knowledge. We lose where things are. Digitally, I'm speaking, of course, and probably physically as well. They're probably like, where the heck's that server we placed a couple of years ago? But with AI, it becomes this institutional kind of database of everything, or can, which is exciting and potentially a little bit scary as well. And Stefan and Anupam, I don't know, in your day-to-day lives, are you guys also working with customers who are kind of intermingling? What's the difference of AI, machine learning? Where do they go? What do they have? That type of stuff? Or is it just so new, you're not seeing that just yet?
Well, first off, I'll jump in here very quickly. And, this slide I think is very important here, because as we look at it, when you dive deep into the artificial intelligence landscape, there's still a lot of snake oil here. And when you sit down, and I would challenge anybody listening, when you go to a conference and you see the branding of AI and ML on the side, go ask. Find the person in the Metallica t-shirt, because that's the sales engineer, or the CTO in the background. Go past sales, go back to them and say, okay, what do you mean by AI and ML? Because artificial intelligence can just go back to that old marketing buzzword, algorithm. And there are still many, many use cases where a traditional algorithm will do very, very well. Often exceed machine learning. And when you dive deeper, when we take away all of the buzzwords on ML, machine learning is matrix math. So it's one step up from algebra. It's literally just take a matrix and do some math operations on it. And then the question becomes, how fast, how do you structure, how do you interlace that one little equation together to then train and give deliverables and either classify data in one way or the other, classify pictures, or use it to generate. So when we dive down, there's a lot of misinterpretation here. And with the institutional memory piece, that's where we're starting to see models get trained and used and not continued to get updated. So while it has this great, many implementations, this great training set, but even just a few years ago, you used to go around to any security conference and you'd say, okay, great, you're using ML and AI. What data set are you training it on? And everyone was using DARPA 99 as a training set. Everyone was using the same training set. That's finally changed a little bit, but that was a data set from one point in time.
That's right.
Okay, I'll step back.
It's a great, no, it's a great point, and I think everybody can see the passion and knowledge you have for this, which is awesome. I don't know, Palm, I don't know if there's anything more you'd like to add.
No, this is absolutely wonderful what Stephen mentioned. In fact, with AI and ML, the snake oil part, I can't agree with you more, because there's while there's a lot of information on ML and AI going on from a threat management perspective and even security incident management, not a lot of people are really, from a training data set example that we pointed out, Stephen, are doing much on this front, because the point is about, and we'll talk a little bit more later on, Tony, that how the training data set can be misused and abused if it's not being even catered to in the first place. So absolutely bang on, Stephen.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. And I just got back from Dubai, went to the GISEC conference, big security conference in the Middle East, and AI and ML were everywhere. And I did just do that. First of all, I'm a sales guy, so I sidestepped my compadres. As I sidestepped my compadres, went and talked to engineers, I'm like, hey, show me what you got going on. And, there was like, well, we got some stuff. And it's like, all right, trust me, I understand what that means. Obviously, everybody can see me right now. I'm Tony, but this is who I really am, right? Captain Obvious. You guys know him from the hotels.com commercials. If you're reading this, you can read Master of the Obvious. But just a couple of points, because I do think being obvious, we all know where AI is going and all this crazy stuff. A couple of charts like to frame things in. And, I love that old expression. Why did, Willie Norton used to rob banks? And it was because that's where the money was, right? So when you follow investment, when you follow market size, no matter who's putting these numbers out, Gartner or Precedence Research or whomever you're looking at, McKinsey, it's just enormous scaling of investment into AI. Thus, it is going to upend all kinds of industries. Of course, cybersecurity being one of them. And when you take a subset out, look at ChatGPT, I just find this chart amazing, right? ChatGPT became the fastest growing app in the world, recording over 100 million users in 2 months. And, time to reach 1 million users. You see all the names, blah, blah, blah. ChatGPT did it in 5 days, right? 5 days they were there and rolling away. They've now gone from 3.5 to 4, and I'm sure everybody on this call has played with it, or at least maybe attempted to play with it. But when you think about some of the research coming out, and I think this was some interesting research from BlackBerry and Checkpoint. There's a huge portion of folks that already think nation states are using this. But point number 2, I've highlighted. 53% of this research of these experts said it would help hackers create more believable phishing emails. The reason I call this out is 2 points. One, phishing emails are pretty damn believable right now. One of our clients got today, though, an email from Jeff Bezos personally saying, hey, I'm giving my wealth away. You've been chosen as a lucky winner. So Jeff hasn't reached out to me on that one just yet. So maybe it can become a little bit more believable. But at the end of the day, if those get more believable, that becomes a big harm to everybody's business, because unfortunately, folks do like to click on things. That gets hopefully taken down with more training. 49% pointed to ability to help hackers improve coding, and we're going to show some examples of that. But the second to last bullet was probably the scariest. ChatGPT will be used to spread misinformation and disinformation. This is coming directly from Sam Altman, the CEO of ChatGPT. He was on Lex Friedman's podcast a week and a half ago now. When he said this, a lot of folks were taken aback, because we've already seen the world of misinformation and disinformation over the last couple of election cycles and, day to day on any of these social media. What does that mean? I mean, if it can do this, where does that leave us understanding anything? And Anupam, I know you have some experience in this. I know you've written some papers. What is your thoughts on misinformation and disinformation, just on this quote from Sam Altman?
I think this, the misinformation and disinformation really it's about the 2 parts that I'll talk a little bit about later. Is more on the content creation itself, like how you can abuse the use of content and creating content in a malicious fashion. So not only by training data sets we were talking about a little bit earlier, but also injecting malicious content into the existing data sets altogether. So there are multiple ways of sort of leading public or targeted the folks to act differently or act in line with what the adversary wants you to do. And we've seen this, like you said, in the couple of election cycles. But not only that, you could have people in financial sectors or utility sectors, if they operate in that fashion, this could be highly disastrous. So this is more, as we have seen over a period of years, as it gets more financially motivated and politically motivated, even more so with the geopolitical situation going on and the world getting even more divided before it gets united. So we're going to see probably the worst of things before it gets better. Yeah,
absolutely. Stefan, any points you'd like to call out?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll go back to an incident response that I did years ago. And this is one where the threat actor was able to gain access to social media for an executive. And and this is years ago, this is pre-ChatGPT. So I want to use this as a one anecdote that highlights where it can go. We can't know where we're going to go until we look back.
Sure.
So I get on with this executive and we're sitting down and we're triaging it. And what we realized was this threat actor, after they gained access to his social media, they started going through and learning how he speaks, learning the nuances, learning his idioms, learning the verbiage that he uses or used at that point. And like he would forget contractions, like the apostrophe for can't when he's writing freehand.
Come on.
This is not an admonition or judgment. This is just how he writes. And so then what they did was they started messaging other prospects. So this gentleman worked in venture capital, and they started talking with using his language all at times. And we were able to categorize it and say, wait, this was him, this was not him. And like we were able to classify when it was the bad guy and when it was his based off logins and other information, but they were speaking how he speaks. Now with ChatGPT, and that's, that's the big example that we can use, but there's many other tools out there, and we can cover some of those. Now, all you have to do is click through, cut and paste, and it will learn to mimic that chat as the person speaks in 2 seconds. It takes you longer to hit Control-C, Control-V than it does to classify it. And that's with written language. We're now seeing this on the fly to do impersonations in audio and video. It only takes about 45 seconds of audio. I've already spoken that much just on this anecdote,
right,
to classify the sound of my voice and how I speak, to classify and then build an AI that can generate this audio. Actually, Tony, surprise, joke's on you. I'm an AI.
I knew that. I just didn't want to say anything.
How magnanimous of you. Thank you, sir.
Exactly. No, go ahead, Anupam.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Stephen, because there's a Newfoundland attack that happened in Canada. This is not even before ChatGPT, like 2-3 years ago, where the seniors were being targeted using the voice sampling of their grandson, for example, to scam them out of thousands of dollars. So this has been was rampant across many provinces in Canada. So this is something which is this is real. This is devastating for people to be armed out of thousands of dollars, and the banks can't do anything about it. The FBI cannot do anything about it. There's thousands of cases lined up like that. So the issue is real. Is hitting the common man as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I'll take it on education too. So attackers have been hitting education, obviously many over the years, also trying to move funds, right? Like, hey, our account needs money moved over to this. Here's the new thing you're going to use. Everybody gets those emails. A lot of folks are now being trained, obviously. Let's have a visual. Well, what folks have started to do is use AI or use manipulation in technology to send a video, maybe of the CFO or whomever might be the person to authorize, and send that as a text message, or maybe it's in Slack or something like that, but definitely text, and say, hey, I need you to, I'm going to shoot you an email on this. I need you to approve this transfer. And folks in AP or or accounts payable or receivable, whatever, are probably like, oh, well, that's my boss. I mean, I'm not going to go bug him or her. He just said this. He's going to send me an email. That college now, which is a fairly large college, literally has a standing thing. If there's anything to be paid out, the people have to get up and walk over and ask, because there's obviously been burned, and now it's going to become even easier to burn, and you're going to see a lot more of those things. Why? Because they are very effective, very effective.
They're so effective. I'm going to highlight one thing here, because we talked about a couple of anecdotes, but to Anupam's point, the misinformation and disinformation at a massive scale, we've been seeing this. And one of the big case studies that I like to go back to are the quote Russian troll farms. So these were effectively defense units that their whole goal was to spread disinformation. And the way they would do it is they would often do it in, this is years ago, Andy Greenberg for Wired did a great write-up on this. It's a phenomenal write-up. Andy said that there basically was three elements to every disinformation: a partial truth, a very questionable non sequitur, and then a very confusing tie to a falsehood. And those three things together are really a strong recipe to make people question their beliefs. And this was done at massive scale, free AI. And it was scaled down to every single analyst. They had about 45 seconds for every hit that came across their workload to come up with a truth, a confusing link, and then a confusing misinformation. Yeah. And it was enough to really sway, multiple populations and how they think.
Absolutely. And you see this, and you can absolutely see how that would affect down to whomever might be at an organization. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of folks don't even have an idea of how that could potentially impact their organization. And this might not just be financial. This could also be the stealing of IP, trade secrets. It could be things like that necessarily don't have a dollar figure attached to it right now, right? Who knows, things that get bad guys into servers, files, cloud, things like that. In fact, we just saw something late last week, where Samsung employees were putting in a bunch of confidential data into ChatGPT, and potentially, because I think this is ongoing, opening up the data to open API's users. And there's also been some healthcare organizations, and this will all remain nameless. We'll name Samsung because they were in the papers. This is published, but healthcare organizations that folks are thinking, hey, if we can use ChatGPT's powers to do X, Y, and Z, let's stuff a bunch of data in there and see what happens. Wow, that's HIPAA, that is PHI, and they're not thinking carelessly. They're thinking, how can we become more efficient and better? And what's this thing going to show us? All of a sudden, that PHI is somewhere on some server that might be able to be gotten to. So that's pretty scary stuff. And this is happening right now. In fact, we've seen some customers outlaw going to ChatGPT, to their team, just until things get figured out a little bit more, because this is kind of the Wild West right now. And even preparing for this presentation, I was putting a bunch of things in chat, and then I would, look before I hit the enter button, think about what I was about to hit, because that's going in there forever, right? Kind of scary.
There were two pieces to Samsung as it was reported. One was proprietary code for products that had not been launched yet. And so that is intellectual property. And then the second piece was just inside company data. And the outcome there for both of those case studies, there's a lot we don't know. So I don't want to, cause any accusations here, but most likely what happened was,
we'll just use the word allegedly.
Allegedly. There's when you go to ChatGPT, and if we're talking like the Da Vinci model or Ada or Babbage, you can get private instances. So that way you have some semblance of keeping that data your own, or at least be able to track where your data lives, as opposed to going to just that same segment that all of us go to together. And because we are training the model, for what comes next. When we put something in to the overall instance, it now benefits the community or translates it. Well, Anupam's going to get back to that. I'm not going to steal all your thunder, but take a look, for anybody that wants to really invest in this space, take a look at the reserved instances.
Yeah, absolutely. A great point you made, Stephen, on Samsung. And clearly, this is something which the companies have to stay ahead of the curve in building up their, I call it intranet of ChatGPT as a private, I'm coining this term here as we speak, is so they can start leveraging, and training the models in terms of not leaking the data out. But the point is that we all acknowledge that this takes a team of data scientists and engineers and software architects to be able to do that. So not every organization in the world is going to be able to do that, but Samsung probably can. And the second thing is that it should have. And the other part is about also the intellectual, when you talk about the intellectual property, the guys, in terms of the training and awareness of how to leverage ChatGPT is something which the organization will stay ahead of. We'll also talk about that a little bit more, because that is something in terms of the usability aspects of the game. What's an acceptable use policy look like when it comes to ChatGPT or generative AI? There are a number of lawsuits going on right now as we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. So think about all the acceptable use policies your organization has, or maybe should have, but has. All of a sudden, people are like, "Oh, we need to put something together for ChatGPT." All of a sudden, right? And you're right. I think people are absolutely scrambling. And you think about developers. We've heard from some of our development team, like the code that it could spit out is excellent. Yeah, but that code that's being spit out is there. So if the code's there, that code can now be understood and even quicker manipulated, right? That's pretty scary stuff. By the way, anybody on this webinar, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. No pun intended on that. Throw them in the chat, and we'll get them answered by humans, by Stefan or by Anupam, not by ChatGPT. But here's an interesting thing. So for those of you, if I had to guess, there's a lot of people on this webinar. For everybody on here, I'm sure you've created an account and signed up. What's funny about it is, as soon as you do sign up, before you hit the next button to get going, this is the screen they show you, right? They're telling you these conversations may be reviewed. They should just say, we're reviewing all this stuff. I should just say that, but they're saying we can. And it's saying, please don't share sensitive information. People hit next, like, let's roll, baby. And they are stuffing this thing with all kinds of stuff. So, what's funny, at least ChatGPT is trying to help a little bit by saying, hey, you might run into some problems. So they're putting up their disclaimer. I think, like anything else, the rest of us are like, we got it. Let's roll, right? So when you do see messages like this, you wish Facebook or TikTok or all the other ones would give you something like this, because
wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, they just do it. They're like the mafia. They just do it. At least these guys are at least telling you, hey, we might do this, which they're going to. All right, Anupam, you're up. 5 critical thoughts on AI and cyber.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about the content creation. So in the previous discussion, you've seen with this generative AI or ChatGPT, this is largely depending on the training data sets. And the training data set, if it's old or altered or modified, or somebody else has mastered it, like as Stephen was pointing out a few seconds ago, then you're basically suiting the objectives of the adversary as opposed to suiting your own objectives that are originally intended. And this would produce not only undesirable results, but this could literally spread disinformation, biased directions. And researchers in the last couple of years have shown that already through multiple universities, that GPT-2 and GPT-3 models can have produced biased information where people could be acting on things like whether it's passing loans for a certain section of the population or that side of the tracks, or maliciously causing people to act differently. So this is something which is training the data sets and creating data sets that are completely unintended for. It can produce a disastrous result. That's number one. Spear phishing, Tony, you've talked about this already. Now, phishing is a bane in the industry. 83% of the successful attacks are already happening because of phishing and spear phishing. We didn't have learned this through this, but the point is that with BEC, business email compromises, phishing, and whaling attacks happening over the period of years, they're not only getting craftier, but the point is with generative AI, this is not just the craftiness of it, but the impersonation that we talked about, the mimicking that we talked about, the writing style, the tone of mimicking the individuals and groups. You've seen groups in WhatsApp or groups in social media platforms, or even the tone of the government. If that is being mimicked, now you have a new boss who expects you to do something in a certain way. So this is, if your culture is that my top management expects me to respond to certain memorandum, or email within a couple of hours, guess, isn't going to be tricky? Absolutely. So this is spear phishing is going to take a whole new dimension altogether, as if it was not just enough right now. And the next part is privacy. This is quite a significant concern. I mean, Google, we've seen it already, but that's more about indexing data here. As you've just shown on the screen, Tony, that despite the warning labels, people have been uploading reams of information on ChatGPT. By the way, this is some of my friends who have pulled out information like this person went to so many conferences, has this kind of designations, went here. So as if the Google map was not enough, this is giving the whole resume of the person right there in front of the eye. So this is something which is now the information, yes, it is there. One could argue that in a number of places, but now it's collating, collecting it, and serving up to you. Number one.
Anupam, let me ask one quick question on that, because you bring up a good point. When it comes to things like GDPR or, New York Department of Financial Services, HIPAA, CCPA, when it comes to those regulatories and those frameworks, do you think AI is going to get us in trouble with that? Or do you think those folks need to update what they're looking for in terms of those frameworks?
So I think very good question, Tony. First of all, so yes, absolutely, they need to update, and there are a number of frameworks that are in place right now, which people can leverage. The secure ML checklist, I was going to talk about that, okay. Or the which is developed by researchers at Google. ART, which is the adversarial robustness toolbox developed by IBM. The AI incident database is another reference model that is for AI systems, so the worldwide, capturing the worldwide incidents, so that you can keep using that in terms of revising your AI models. Then there's a XAI, which is next explainable framework. So there are a number of frameworks that are out there which are being deployed in some of by the MSSPs like yourself and others to enhance the cybersecurity management or monitoring part of the game altogether, and of course lay down a good groundwork. So absolutely right. So yeah. So back to the privacy thing. So now privacy thing, one could also argue that, look, there are a number of other platforms. I mean, besides the Samsung thing, like we've seen with, and Stephen, you might have seen this with Pastepin or GitHub Gist or CodePen. There are so many other platforms where people upload code and intellectual property, which and even personal information, which has been stolen by cyber attackers. But the point here is that the generative AI amplifies this privacy issue multiple folds, just because of the volume of information available now. So that's the privacy becomes a big thing. But again, the use of the frameworks that I just pointed out and in deploying to the tools makes it much more makes it pragmatic to be able to solve this problem in a manner that is going to be usable for the enterprises. So it's not like it cannot be done, but it's years away, I would say that right now. The next one is about the large language manipulation. The large language manipulation is more of using the state actors in altering the algorithms. So it's a little bit different from the content manipulation part, but it's more about the model manipulation itself by leveraging the software vulnerabilities or infrastructure vulnerabilities and so on and so forth to cause, and in little manipulations, for example, in a financial sector, could result in disastrous consequences. So this is something which is again a big thing, but it's again it's not all negative. There are a number of positives. One of the things I'd like to point out is that the operational burden on the security operations teams is likely to greatly reduce, because personally, firsthand, I've seen this. The people in operations spend some oodles of hours and sometimes days in reporting up to the management on how the needle is moving in mindless slideware. Now, with generative AI, this waste of time could go away. You could really get into the trenches with the management and debate and tackle the threats and incidents at hand and talk about how do we solve the next problem, as opposed to mindless slideware. And number two is about, of course, the security frameworks. How do we get those security frameworks working on our tools? Which I think when you talk about some of these issues in your SOAR platform, we can see how this can be brought to life.
Yep. Excellent points there, Anupam. I think everybody probably is looking at this right now and thinking through how it can apply to their business. And, I think for some folks, it could be scary. So let's jump over and Stefan, let's talk about your immediate thoughts. And then there's a couple questions that come in that we'll kind of knock out during this as well.
Absolutely. The first and most important critical thought that I have, and I get to cheat on this, I get to say Anupam's right.
All right, done. Good.
So as we look at it, like, that's a very pragmatic approach to understanding what are some of the big things that we need to think about in the industry. And everything from content creation to spear phishing to privacy and how large language models can be manipulated. And there are a lot of positives. It's not all negative, and how we're not just here to strike fear into ourselves and our partners. And let's talk about that fear a little bit, though, because there is, in some places, in some instances, a legitimate fear that AI will take our jobs. Like, software engineers are trembling in their shoes right now because AI remembers, like, no matter how many times you sit down to write a for loop, pretty much everybody has to look up and go, oh, wait, how do we write it in this language? Because as you shift around the languages that you write in, I'm in C++. That's a different type of for loop than in Python. So it's not necessarily going to take our jobs. What it will do, and let's talk about how it does change. It's probably no one in this webinar right now, but for industries where the job used to be, you have an inbox on this side of your desk and you've got an outbox on this side of the desk, and you pick up the form and you look at it and you take your pencil around and you validate that everything has a capital letter at the beginning and the boxes are all filled out and this bubble is filled in and this is an accurate, well filled out form, and you put it in the next outbox. If your job is to classify data and validate data at that level, yes, it may take your job. But here's the deal. Computers already took that job for the most part with algorithms years ago. And if we go back even further, I get to spend a lot of time reading with my kids. My goal is to put my kids to sleep every night. We read a book. And one of the next books that we'll be reading, the great illustrated classics, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. That was at a time period where whaling was going away. And what did whaling do? Whaling brought oil for lamps. And it was quickly being replaced by other methods like electricity. The young whalers either turned it, then they shifted. They looked at it, okay, whaling industry is going away. You either give up or you adapt. And so the young whalers started going, okay, if my job is to light the world, I should go learn how to pull cables and spread electricity across. And that's where the trade unions came up and arose around electricity, and they're still thriving. Electrician is still a valuable trade and will continue to be for a long time.
If you can find them.
If you can find them. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And thankfully around here, we've got a couple good ones where I am. So I'm blessed with that. But when we look at those stair-step technology changes, it's probably, let's get to point number 3, it's probably not going to take our jobs. Because as we look at it, some of the CTOs, the chief technology officers for some of the biggest organizations in the world, when they code, and this includes like ChatGPT, they use things like GitHub Labs, which help them become better coders. And when you dive into computer science, many computer scientists, computer engineers have this goal of becoming what they call a 10x engineer. And that's where the value of your code is 10 times better than anyone else's. And we will have more 10x engineers because of this. And the impact, because of what we see, will revolutionize many industries. Like, we'll go back to the shipping and logistics industry as whalers went from whaling to moving things around the world. Same thing. We're going to see continually better services, which will in the end mean better experience for the people that are using the applications.
Absolutely.
Which is great.
Absolutely. And just to add to that point, Stephen, you made a wonderful point there. Right? Adding value to people at a base level. This is something which, when transformation happened in Henry Ford's era, I'm going to take back 100 years from the horse buggy world to the cars of that years, and now to the assisted driving and fully self-less driving, which is coming up. I mean, think about whether people would like to stay on it as a horse buggy guys. They transformed over a period of 20-25 years to become car drivers, and now ultimately they want to get into assisted driving to be able to serve that handicapped population. The population could never drive. So seniors who could be still, whose brains are fully functioning at 99% capacity, could contribute to the economy. So this is a huge impact to the world in terms of automation. No questions about it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that impact will be felt not just in metropolitan areas, but it will be felt in rural areas across the world, in first, second, and third world countries, which is amazing. And this goes back into to point number 4, is efficiency is speed and time is valuation. So when we look at the business cases for embracing this change, what AI in general and machine learning do for you when you embrace them is they allow you to go faster. They allow you to be more efficient. And when you go faster, you save time. And anyone that's gone through private equity, anyone that's gone through venture capital, anyone that's tried to go public or works at a public company knows the more time you save, the higher your valuation. If you're going for that next private equity round, the more efficient you're able to be, the more time you've saved means your multiple literally goes up. And when your multiple goes up, you're able to help your constituency and your stakeholders at a more meaningful, tangible way.
Amen on that point. That's a wonderful point. You should have copyrighted that sentence, just like Anupam wanted to do his a few minutes ago.
Well, yeah, I'll hop over to the USPTO here in a minute, and we'll get that locked in.
Hey, talk about your last point, because a question just came in that is, I think you're going to address in that last point, and I think it's perfect. This question that just came in, and how you're probably going to talk about it right now.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So here's the deal. AI can catch AI.
Right.
AI can catch AI. You want to know one of the easiest use cases here to know how AI can catch AI? Talk to a middle schooler right now writing papers for class.
Or my daughter's in high school, by the way. The teachers have already come out and said, you do this, this is what's going to happen to you.
Absolutely. So what do they have to do? And this is simple case study. Students write a paper and they submit it to a plagiarism checker. And what does that plagiarism do? It goes to classic machine learning. What does AI do best? And that is classify content to determine how it was written, who it was written by, et cetera, et cetera. So when they go in and try this out, go get a free account from what are they? The Turnitin of the world.
Right.
Go check it. Have it something generated by AI. Throw it in, and watch it grade it for you, and see how red it'll be by saying this clearly was written by a bot. In fact, Mick Merritt, they're a security practitioner in the world, and they do a great job. And one of the things that they say is they've been going out, they've been looking at all of the influencers on LinkedIn, and they've said they put their posts into classifiers and go, oh my gosh, 78%. I think I'm getting that number right, Mick. 78% of LinkedIn influencers right now are generating the majority of their content with AI.
Yeah.
So AI can catch AI. We're going to see more filters coming through. We're going to see companies that, instead of just checking emails inbound to classify them as phishing, we're going to start seeing companies come up around classifying inbound emails to see whether it was written by a person or by a bot.
Yep, great point. Anupam, your thoughts on that, please.
Absolutely. This is something which I'm going to use my son's example right here, because so this is interesting. 78% of the content, and my son said, I was helping him with his homework, and said, okay, we couldn't figure something out. I was on Google, as they can imagine, and say, okay, can we use some of this information? He said, Dad, this is not the way you do it. There's an anti-plagiarism thing that way they can jumble up the words, and out comes the product, which the teachers cannot now recognize that, okay, this was really plagiarized. Really? So there's a plagiarism and anti-plagiarism, and the people, AI, helping AI to cheat more and more. So the thing is, to Stephen's point, is how do we keep training the data sets and stay ahead of the curve? So it's not like, okay, you have an AI is the panacea. How do I keep training my model to be on top of the game? That's going to be the game.
Anupam, are you saying that we might be in a AI arms race?
Absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, this is my AI talking now. Back to you.
Nice. Yeah, my daughter came to me. She's 1 month from graduating high school, and she came to me and said, Dad, can you show me how this ChatGPT works? And I'm like, no, because you got 1 month left. I don't need you to plagiarize something and get thrown out of school with 1 month left. So yeah, I'll show her in about 3 weeks when school's about over. No, these are great, guys. And, look, we're running a little tight on time, and I've been interspersing the questions that have been coming in. Real quick, I'm just a point or two on this, Anupam, and then we'll go to Stefan. Just any points in, just AI advances that you've seen specifically in cyber right now. We have a few on screen. What are some things that maybe that you've seen?
So I just say a couple of things on this front, and the research is on, as you can imagine, it's an understatement. On the root cause analysis, automation, and MTDR, and incident response. I mean, my thoughts really, like, it all starts with security or cybersecurity. It all starts with the asset and what's in scope. In security, you reduce scope or you identify your scope. So the AI, through the big challenge in the cybersecurity world is how to continuously detect and flag and classify assets on an ongoing basis. And it should be happening in almost like real time, which people with 15 or 16 or 17 different where the CMDBs went in the world? It went nowhere. So CMDB, I wouldn't call it a failure, but whether you look at the banks, you look at the large enterprises, even despite multiple millions of dollars investments, the CMDBs they don't go anywhere. So here, there's opportunity for AIs to, when you continuously flag those assets and classify them, the data identification, the data that matters to the organization is assigned the controls, and not over engineering or under engineering them, is based on the asset value of the value of the data, and that basically controls that basically provides adequate protection in line with what's required, what's going to be acceptable to the C-levels or the CFOs, especially the CFOs and CEOs. I mean, the thing what I've heard in the cybersecurity industry is that if you're spending $500 on a security lock to protect a $50 bicycle, the CEO throws you out of the room.
That's right.
And that's where the CISOs are not making headway. I mean, many CISOs are not, but the smarter ones are. And the AI can help you accomplish that much faster. That's the point.
Stefan, any points you'd make on this?
Oh, absolutely. So, I like to stand on the shoulders of giants and not just have it be my own opinion. So I'll highlight Carlota Sage here. She is a phenomenal vCISO. She's just solid in the industry, and she's a good person. So what she says, anytime we look at cybersecurity, whether it is AI involved or ML involved or nothing involved, she says one thing: show me the money. Show me the money. And when we look at AI advancements in cyber, just in general, the question becomes not just how much cost savings can we have, but it also turns into how much does this enable a company to go to market and win? Alternatively, if we're looking at the nonprofit space or the non-for-profit space, the 501 whatevers, it becomes, how can we continue to execute our mission in a meaningful way and protect our donors?
That's right.
And when we look at kind of those two, core elements here, AI advancements absolutely help us do that, right? Not just from classifying behavior good or bad, or after they classify it, getting it and enabling the security operations center analyst to determine whether it's good or bad, high risk or confirmed. And it's also not just about helping incident response workflows come through. And Tony and Anupam, we've all, between the three of us, and Tony, you discount your ability here and say you're just a sales guy. That's not fair to you. I'm going to keep telling you that.
I'm just a peddler.
Yeah. I'll gloss over that for now, and we'll talk about it over beer sometime. But when we look at it, the questions that we ask on incident response, the core level questions, are still the same today that they were on my first incident response in 2001. What happened? What's the impact of the proposed solutions? Which ones do we think will address root cause?
Yep.
Then the question becomes, where are the logs that we need to confirm or deny? But the first 25 minutes on an incident response call, those questions back and forth are generally the same. And if we can automate those, the mean time to fix goes down, which means the cost to the organization goes down, which means our ability to go to market and win, or to help execute our mission to help people that, in the nonprofit space, continues to go up.
Yep.
And that's why I'm so excited about these advancements.
No, it's a great point. We were with a customer the other day, a great hospital who's been a customer for a long time. And their CISO looked at us and said, just what you just said, the process hasn't really changed, but the speed has changed. We need solutions that just move, because every second, every minute, theoretically, just puts us behind the 8 ball. The faster we move, the bigger chance we have, maybe not always to stop, but at least to mitigate our risk. And when it comes to being a smart executive, it's not always about stop, because everybody knows you can't always just stop. But if you can mitigate risk and mitigate the damage and really bring things down to a manageable point, that's what seasoned executives are looking to do in a layered approach. And when he told us that 2 weeks ago, and when we were preparing for this, I'm like, my goodness, he hit the nail on the head. That is a fantastic point to raise.
Yeah, wonderful point, Tony. I just want to add to what Stephen, you said. And when you do things with speed, that builds momentum. I mean, laws of physics. And when you build momentum, the big move, as they call it, this is what really inspires the security teams to continue to do better and better every day.
Absolutely.
So, and that is something which, it's not like stopping, but once you do better, the world, obviously gets better through the productive use of AI.
Absolutely. And so for everybody out that is on this presentation, we build this deck to also live as its own breathing element. So when you get it, it doesn't just have some components and you got to figure out what these experts were trying to say. Everything's in here to hopefully give you some, really good understanding, get you going, maybe get you thinking a little bit. So we're going to gloss over some of these slides, but they're here as you receive these slides just to see some great examples. You'll see a flurry of, as we get tight on time, a flurry of examples of just sticking things into ChatGPT to potentially create 12-year-old hackers just because you have to speak English or type English, and you're going to get out probably really good code, SQL injections and different things like that. For the sake of time, we're gonna run through this. But
wait, do you mean we're not going to train everybody on the call on how to do code obfuscation on the fly?
That's our next
Tony?
webinar, Stefan. We're going to bring you back for that next webinar. But you guys can have it in this deck and kind of see it and go play with it, right? Just go play with it yourself. Just don't put any really interesting information in there. We've definitely covered this slide. And the one thing I want to mention about Agile Blue, and there was a couple questions that came in and what we're specifically doing. I'll tell you, our roadmap this year is really based on SOAR, the orchestration and the auto response. That's what our customers want. So a gentleman by the name of Andrew Carmelli, who's been with Agile Blue almost since day one, like day 4, which is awesome. Really working on amazing tools, especially around reinforcement machine learning to train our agents to not only understand, to not only update, so to speak, but then to respond in a way that makes sense, right? With a high confidence score that we know we can isolate a machine or shut down in a 365 account or take something out the firewall, whatever it might be, whatever the use case might be. This is where we're putting our time and our energy into. So as we start launching more and more of our technologies, our clients and prospects, of course, will be made aware of it. I just said 10 minutes ago that I'm a peddler. I used to be a software engineer and I worked for Apple, but I was the worst software engineer ever at Apple. They pushed me into sales pretty darn quick.
Still a software engineer, Tony.
Exactly.
In my mind, yeah. In my physical ability, no. And again, you'll have this slide to take example of what some things we're doing. What I do want to end on, though, because we've been interspersing questions, just defending against AI based attack. Anupam, you want to take a couple of these, and then Stefan can wrap us up.
I think one of the most important part is up to date with AI based threats. How do you train and retrain the models that continuously staying up to date? But this particular one, the train your employees on the best practice, it really shortens the gap, because when you talk about role-based training from the receptionist to the CEO, every role is not created equal. It's paramount for, depending on what type of data you're dealing with, what type of equation you have in the firm, and therefore what type of risk do you pose to the organization and the world. It matters a lot. Therefore, the training has to be relevant, and also honing in on the skills that are required on the day off, on the month off, based on the attacks that you're seeing. So therefore, if a certain CEOs of a certain sector are being attacked by a certain type of whaling attacks, then I need to bring in a few CEOs down in this conversation tomorrow, today. And that training is necessary. So this AI really can propel that thought process rather quickly. So this leverage that. And similarly, then you talk about the incident response plans and tabletop exercises, which can create an operational teams which are not only agile, but are responsive to the threats of the day. And you can design and bespoke tabletop exercises to be ready for the next incident, as opposed to working on something which is 10 years old.
That's right. Excellent points, Anupam. Really appreciate that. Stefan, round third, take us home, baby.
Absolutely. So when we look at some of these ways of how to defend against AI-based hacks, as a military guy myself, I look at how do we defend. So if you take out the words AI and 24/7 and XDR and ML, if we take out all those buzzwords and lingo, this comes down to how to defend against attacks. How do we train our people? How do we build our plans? How do we work with experts? How do we get the right tools in place, and how do we get the right controls? So we can take the jargon out, and this becomes human fundamentals. And I can tell you that when we would go through, whether it was deployed forward and training exercises back here in the United States, when I was in the military, if we look at just defense and we go through and we plan all of our tools and our training, et cetera, there's 2 measures we need to look at: measures of performance and measures of effectiveness. Measures of performance says, are we doing things right? Measures of effectiveness, because if we just tell a CIO this, it's, hey, do all the things. So we have to look at measures of effectiveness, which says, how effective are we? And it really asks even a simpler question: are we doing the right things? So as we look at the rapid world of changing AI and ML and how it can impact us in the cyber landscape. Are we doing things right? And are we doing the right things in order to help our organization go win?
No, great points by both of you. And the thing I would say, just to kind of highlight as we get close to wrapping up, of course, you're going to talk to cyber experts. Of course, you're going to look at technologies. Of course, you're going to look at AI-based tools, but that's going to take some time. And these things are maturing. That train your employees, at least making them aware of all these types of things, is probably the key short-term thing you can do right now to have some impact. And then, of course, launching more of these types of cyber defense tools and working on incident response plans and working with experts is where you need to be. But right now, the more aware, the more training you can provide, at least probably get you that short term. And just don't, just tell people not to stuff a bunch of confidential information in ChatGPT. I don't think that's going to help anybody right now. Everybody who's been on this presentation, you guys stayed an hour with us. We appreciate it. Stefan, always a pleasure. Amazing points. Anupam, I mean, just fantastic content. Thank you so much for your expert analysis. And it's going to change because this is changing. So we'll do another one of these and we'll see how things have changed. If anybody wants to get a hold of Stefan or Anupam, please send me an email and I will funnel the questions to them and they'll get it answered for you. Really appreciate everybody's time. Stefan, thank you. Anupam, thank you. Everybody have a wonderful day. It's noon, East Coast. Go have lunch. If you're on Stefan's time, you got an hour to wait. Everybody have a good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Pleasure.